All right, gonna move on. Scientific Sunday. If Ryan's here, wait till you hear me break some of this down. Even though I had to print it off because there's so much information here, and it's all such good stuff. I still wanted to cover a lot of it without reading through the entire thing for you. But okay, so Scientific Sunday. Ryan Rodimer, he is the director of our genetic education here. Wonderful, wonderful, so knowledgeable. He breaks down his blogs for us every other week. It's so easy to read the information that he creates. And I implore you to check this out, because what's going to happen is we're going to find out that aortic disease is primarily genetically connected in some point in the future. So even if you've been tested, and even if you've heard that sometimes people are tested and it comes back negative, that is only for today. That does not mean that it's going to stay negative in another 6, 7, 8 years, because the amount of genes and mutations that have been discovered just in the last 8 years have gone up. So I experienced my first genetic test in 2016, a year after my dissection. I just was tested again, and there was more genes to look out for. So I'd say keep searching. Have it retested every, I don't know, if Ryan's still there, maybe he can give insight, but I would say at least every 6 to 8 years, check in, find out if there have been more genes discovered or mutations, and see if you can get yourself tested. But so we've been discussing a variety of topics, but genetics, once a far off dream, has really transformed into this reality. And it's like as close as our fingertips at this point. So with it comes the promise of personalized medicine, the potential for early disease detection, and a wealth of insights into our own genetic makeup. And it's just so unbelievably fascinating. But while these scientific strides are exciting, they can also leave your head scratching with this. So how much is this whole process going to cost me? Because we always know there's a cost that's potentially associated. So chatting about costs and insurance coverage and all things financial with genetic testing, there really is no need for penny pinching or panic or insurance-induced insomnia, as Ryan says. In this blog, we've got you covered. He goes over everything for you, and you can always reach out to Ryan at myaorticjourney.com. And as he mentions, please, this all ties into our Think Aorta, Think Family concept that we support for the folks over at Think Aorta US. So let's talk about this. Let's get into the nitty gritty. Okay. Insurance coverage and genetic testing doesn't need to be this big web that you need to untangle. Okay. You don't throw in the towel when it comes to thinking about genetics and having your genes tested. Okay, it's not as overwhelming as you think. Let's look at some of the key points that he mentions here. So insurance coverage. This is actually really good news here when it comes to if you have insurance. Many insurers are now actually stepping up to the plate when it comes to genetic testing. But like as any good relationship, Ryan says, it's all about communication. So before you jump in to having your genes tested, you might want to talk to your insurance carrier and provider and find out the coverage and what might be covered and what isn't, because it's going to be different for different carriers. There's a little bit of legwork up front, but if your own cardiology department doesn't handle that for you for some reason, you should make those calls for yourself. My personal experience for me, just for me, was I didn't have to do a thing. I was told we should have your genes tested. Somebody will be in touch. They got in touch with me. I did what I needed to do as far as paperwork and submitting a sample, and that was it. That's all I had to do. Not everyone's going to have it that easy. So genetic counselors are extremely helpful in this area. Your cardiologist, if they're well-versed and knowledgeable, they're going to be extremely helpful in this area. Not so much your surgeon. Have I seen surgeons that are really involved in this? It's typically genetic counselors that your cardiologist refers you to, or your cardiologist in themselves. The lab billing staff can also take on a lot of this legwork for you as well. So let's talk about rates. Well, I don't have specific costs, but let's talk about them. Okay, so if an insurance company starts sending you into this massive downward spiral tailspin of costs and pre-authorizations and blah, 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 and it's just going to be too much work, you should consider the self-pay discounted rate. So a lot of these genetic testing companies will offer a discount if you're going to pay out of your own pocket yourself. So a lot of these labs offer this, and this has really become a game changer when it comes to having your genes tested, particularly if your personalized cost estimate with insurance exceeds the self-pay price. So once you've gone down the insurance route and the claim has been submitted, you may be locked in and no longer able for the self-pay option. So it makes sense to choose that option from the start. It might really make sense to just do that. And there's a handful of labs that actually cap the cost for someone to do self-pay, and they cap it at $250 or less. And I can tell you that I can remember 8 years ago, it was more money. So these costs have significantly come down as technology has gone up, as knowledge has grown, and as more people are participating. And I'm not talking about 23andMe. We're talking about some other organizations, some other labs that we're going to talk about in a minute. So first thing you need to know, as with many different things, if you're going to go down the insurance route, potato, if you're going to go down that, many health plans actually require prior authorization. They sometimes require prior authorization for a CT scan. So why should we assume this would be any different? So if they need this, what does prior authorization actually mean if you're going to have some tests? So it means that your insurance company needs to actually give the nod of approval for the test before they determine whether or not they're going to cover it. So if you want to go down the path of hoping that your insurance company will cover it, you might need to have prior authorization. So if your prior authorization from insurance is actually denied, then you probably would be offered that self-pay price, which we just talked about, typically caps at $250 and it's under. And that's going to be for your specific genetic test. This could be, there's a bunch of different things that go into this test. So simply ask for a referral for genetics from your doctor. And if the closest genetics clinic is too far away from you, then there's multiple telehealth genetic counseling services available. So my genetic counselor, which was Hopkins, was just down the road. But I still did it telehealth. I didn't need to go in. I just needed to fill out the paperwork. And I just needed to submit a sample, and everything happened within a week. It was all very, very, very fast. So in-network laboratories, and I'm sure a lot of this probably is applicable to blood tests. I'm sure we've heard a lot of this when it comes to blood tests and having things be pre-authorized and where you're going to go and closest labs and stuff like that. So some labs are actually considered in-network for most health plans, and that includes the big players like Aetna, like Cigna, Anthem, United Healthcare, and a lot of these labs also accept national and regional carriers within the United States. But even if a lab is in network for your insurance plan, it doesn't mean that it's going to cover 100% of your costs. Our system is screwy, and we're not going to talk about that today. But even if your insurance is supposedly covered, it doesn't mean it's 100% covered. The total amount that you're going to owe is actually determined by your individual health plan. So it's really best to contact member services and to get more information, or in most cases, let the genetics counselor make that call for you, let the lab, they're going to figure it all out. So a lot of this stuff sounds like it's so much legwork, but there's other people in place that actually will do this legwork for you. Okay. Medicare and Medicaid. So a lot of people in this community that are no longer working, that are on disability, that now receive Medicare and or Medicaid. Okay. So Medicare does not actually have guidelines for the coverage of genetic testing as it relates to cardiology. However, there are some labs, such as Invitae, that may not balance bill the patient if they have straight Medicare. So, and this can be subject to change. In my particular case, my Medicare, which was my primary, and my secondary, I didn't pay anything. I paid zero out-of-pocket costs, and I used Invitae. So I paid nothing. This is the second time I've paid nothing. 8 years prior, when I was utilizing the marketplace as my insurance because I was no longer working and COBRA was too much money. So I was using Blue Cross Blue Shield. I paid nothing, and that was with GeneDx. That's another organization. It's another lab. I paid nothing both times. But if your Medicare policy is managed by another insured, like Blue Cross Blue Shield Medicare, okay, it might actually be best to go with the self-pay discounted rate. So these are all things, again, you hope your genetics, counselor is going to make these billing phone calls for you, determine, do we go through insurance? Do we need prior authorization? Should we just do self pay? And they're going to figure this all out and they're going to talk to you about this. So that's the theme of all of this. Let your genetics counselor and their department make these calls for you. This is just to educate you and give you an idea of the bright red tape that goes on in the world of getting your genetic test to arrive at your home. We haven't even gotten it to get to your house yet, right? This is just the preliminary discussions. It's a lot of red tape. Let somebody else do it for you. And genetic counselors are really, at the end of the day, the superhero of this entire blog that Ryan presented. So that it means he's a superhero too. Yes, he is. Let's just say it. All right. These
Ryan is a
professionals are.
superhero.
What did you say?
Ryan is a superhero. You said
He's
say it.
totally a
I'm saying it.
superhero. He just needs a cape. Totally a superhero. But they not only can help with working out items with the lab and insurance and finding the most cost effective option for your genetic testing, but they're also equipped with the expertise to help you navigate the maze of genetic testing costs and insurance coverage, which ultimately will give you the peace of mind and potentially saving you a pretty penny in the process. Let the genetic counselors do what they do best, right? So, in conclusion, navigating the costs and the insurance coverage in genetic testing, it's a daunting task. But if you're armed with the right knowledge, which is let the genetic counselors do it, it doesn't really have to be. And if you're at least familiar with the process, then when they mention some of these things we've talked about to you, it won't seem like a foreign language. So whether it's understanding your insurance coverage, considering self-pay discounted rates, or enlisting the help of a counselor, there's plenty of routes that you can choose from to make genetic testing actually affordable and accessible. So don't let that conundrum of cost actually hold you back from having testing done if that's what you'd like to do. There's a lot of other issues, pros and cons when it comes to having clinical testing versus research. So I'm sure we'll get into that at some point, um, but when it comes to this, having it done in a clinical setting, if it's becoming way too overwhelming, just let the genetic counselors do it. Let them do it. And make sure you get everything in writing so that there's no confusions. I would say, for me personally, I'd want it in writing. Here's your estimated cost. Wink. Not so if you're told zero and then all of a sudden, $250 comes back, you kind of can then ask questions why. So thank you, Ryan, for breaking this down. At the end of the day, we know that it's important for a lot of people to be genetically tested. And so this is just part of the process. It's part of the headache, the noise, the background noise, but it doesn't have to be so daunting. And that's the key here. Let the superheroes take over. And that was our Sunday. That was our Sunday series.
That's a good Sunday. Ryan chimes in to say, I'd ask a provider every 2 to 3 years about updates to genetic testing, especially with aortic disease where updates are coming somewhat frequently.
Okay, so I didn't even know that. So that's
Hmm.
new information for me, and I love learning and I love having updates. So, yeah. So as Ryan's saying, don't wait 6 to 8 like I did, because now they're happening more rapidly. If you're going to have genetic testing and then something's coming back unknown, uh, a variant of unknown, what is VUS? He's going to tell me in a minute. I can't remember what the S stands for. I always forget. Chime in and tell me what that S stands for. Unknown significance. Variant of
Bam.
unknown significance. Boom. Which
Right
means
on.
there's something, right? But not a lot of people have it. So it's really not very significant at this particular moment in time, but maybe it might be in the future. But it's definitely not the major issue that's causing you problems. I think that's it in a nutshell. Or it may come back that there's, in so many words, something there, but we don't have a gene or a mutation. We haven't found the little boo-boo on your DNA yet to call it this or that. What that kind of tells me is what they do know is what it isn't. We definitely know it's not one of the typical aortopathies. Hey, Ryan, I used that big word that usually lead to aortic disease issues. So that's good for me in my book to know that I don't have one of those. But it doesn't mean I'm out of the woods for the rest of my life. That's all that it kind of means to
Okay.
me. So 2 to 3 years, go get tested again.
Okay. Also,
Yeah,
Velda dropped in to say hi. Hi, Velda.
I'm swallowing. Hi, Velda.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
And Rob wanted to chime in just to say Tuesday was the last kitchen until the fall. He wants to let the audience know that it'll be back, and also he's going to be posting on the Aortic Hope blog soon. He did mention that he's going to be putting the recipes for the things that he has prepared and made up there on
That's
that blog.
awesome.
So be ready to go back there and check that stuff out.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
Ryan says he just heard the superhero comment, "My aorta is my kryptonite."
Well, yeah,
Or the
it is.
source of his superpowers. We don't know yet. We don't know.
Yeah, flip that script. You never know. It kind of became the source of my, it's both. My aorta is the source of my superpowers, but it's kind of my kryptonite. Depends on the day. Depends on the day. That is for sure.